Hello, my name is Kedar and you're watching rptv News. In 2017, rptv launched the first in a series of videos called Regent Park's The Past, the Present, and the Future. We also interviewed Regent Park residents to find out what life was like in the past. We asked them about what life is like for them in the present. And finally, we explored their hopes and visions for the future. 7 years have passed since the first episode, and much has changed, though some things still stayed the same. New buildings have risen, more people have moved in, and now phases 4 and 5 are already underway. At rptv, we're excited to revisit Regent Park's past, present, and future with a new series of interviews. Regent Park remains a vibrant place where many newcomers come to when they first arrive, and where others have put down roots and call home. The revitalization has brought many changes, attracting many residents who also see the benefits of this neighborhood. And now, with all this in mind, let's go meet some of our Regent Parkers.
Regent Park has long been a community at the intersection of change and challenge. Today we're bringing you a story that not only sheds light on the experiences of one individual, but also opens a larger conversation about the broader impact of civic engagement. In this series of Regent Park Past, Present, and Future, we aim to capture the voices of residents like Deany Peters, whose civic engagement has left an indelible mark on Regent Park, proving that the past and present can inform and inspire a brighter future for all. Deany Peters has been a pillar of the Regent Park community since 1981. For over 30 years, she worked tirelessly as a community development worker at the Regent Park Community Health Center, while also serving on numerous nonprofit boards. Her dedication earned her the Sir James Woods Award for Community Development in 2013. A former teen mom who overcame significant social and economic challenges, Deany is now the proud grandmother of 6 adult grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. At the heart of her work is a deeply held belief that quality of life can be profoundly improved when people become actively involved and participate in the civic institutions that form the backbone of a more inclusive and equitable society. Driven by this conviction, Deany has spent decades empowering others to take part in shaping a better community for everyone. Now, let's meet Deany.
My name is Deany Peters. I'm a longtime resident of Regent Park. I moved into the Regent Park neighborhood in 1981. I was a single mom with 3 little ones. And I lived in 15 Bellshaw Place. It was a Metro Toronto housing building. And I lived there for 17 years. And then I moved and bought a house over on River in Dundas. And I lived there in River in Dundas from 1995 to 2019, and I sold that house and I bought a condominium over at One Cole. I've been in this community, I wanted to stay in this community, and I will stay here for as long as I can manage. Yeah, my fondest memories of Regent Park are when I moved into the community. There was a lot of single moms and soul support moms, and I was a young woman, and so they took me under their wing and they taught me the ropes. I had a very dear friend, Linda Swinemer, who actually taught me how to shop. I was having a hard time, trying to afford the groceries for 3 children. And I not only wanted groceries for 3 children, but all their friends. So she took me to a place called the Toronto Groceteria. It was a wonderful little store that sold things at warehouse prices, and they delivered. So not only, could you get all your lunch things at a really reasonable price, but when they delivered to your place, and when you'd get your groceries, he would throw in little gifts like, some perfume or some toys for the kids or some games for your family. Just little things like that that just made you feel really good. And so I loved that place. And they were over there on Broadview, and they stayed there until they retired. The couple that owned the place retired. That was one. Rutenberger, of course. The Rutenberger. I loved the Rutenberger. We used to go down for coffee in the morning. The culture of the community was so wonderful. Like, there was a sense of community. Each one knew each other. You walked down the street, you knew each other. There were all these little informal gathering spots, like around the buildings, and you'd see all the residents. And I say one of the things is that we had those shared experiences. We had those things in common. If one of us was miserable, all of us were miserable. So you'd be, even if it was somebody you really didn't know that well, or you got on the elevator with them, it would be like, did you see what they did now? Or did you hear that last night? So there was that commonality that made you feel like a community. And I think that, when I run into old-time OGs, right, the old-time Regent Parkers, we'll say, well, we miss that. I know there was a lot of things said about how terrible it was to be in Regent Park, but there was a lot of stigma. The same thing could happen in another community and they wouldn't get the bad press we got here. So the assumption was that it was such a terrible place, nobody wanted to live here. And that's not true. That's totally not true. I was a member of the Regent Park Community Worker Training Project. The residents of the community felt that there was a problem because residents in this community didn't have jobs in this community. So they worked in the Regent Park Residents Association, the RPRA, they were called at the time. They worked with George Brown College and a number of community agencies to develop this project that would train young people who would then go on to work in the community and work in the different organizations. And I took my placement opportunity with Regent Park Community Health Center. Regent Park Community Health Center was the first agency I ever walked in because, of course, you have 3 children, you need a doctor. So when I had the choice of which agency I'd like to do my placement with, the health center was a partner, and I chose the health center. There was no community workers at the time. I was trained by community nurses, Teresa Hughes and Bonnie Work-Monroe, who were fantastic supervisors. And, and I was mentored through the women that worked in the RPRA. I'm very fortunate to this day. I live at Cole Street. And a lot of people don't realize that Cole Street is named after Patricia Cole, who was my mentor. And I just love it. I love the fact that I live on her street to this day. But they were, really, they wanted to ensure that people in this community had a say, in the quality of life that they were experiencing here. So that they weren't just advisors, that they were decision makers, that they had opportunities, real opportunities to affect change in this community. And I was, mentored by those people. And of course, I've carried that on through my profession as a community development worker. So I think that the community, has always wanted to be involved in what's happening. If you're going to make a decision that's going to directly impact my life, then I want to be part of that decision making. Yeah, well, I was trained. Fortunately, I was trained as a community development worker by the residents of this community. And I can honestly say, the way that we believe, and we still believe, is that residents know what residents need and that they are the experts. So doing resident engagement it came natural to me. I was a teen mom to begin with, so I know what it's like to have other people think they need to make decisions for you. We had a lot of that in this community, of people who made decisions for us, not with us. I was mentored by residents who felt that was inappropriate. And we used to call the community Research Park. Everybody and anybody wanted to do research on Regent Park. And I think that's still going on to this day. And often they would talk to people about us, but they wouldn't talk to us. And so then you'd hear this wonderful thing that was said by somebody about you that wasn't necessarily accurate. And that kind of spurred the residents on to say, no, if you want to talk about Regent Park residents, you talk to Regent Park residents. I also know that when you are directly impacted, like if you feel that you have no ability to affect your life or to make decisions that impact on the quality of your life, that affects your health. And I work for a healthcare center, I work for healthcare. And we believe that when people have that sense of involvement and that when people feel that they have a say in things that directly impact them, it makes them healthier. It actually does. It affects them. So we do what we can to ensure that residents actually have a voice in this community. During the time I was a student, the residents were collecting $2 a month from residents to build the community center. So the Regent Park Community Center came about because residents seen the need. It's a bit of history that actually goes back to the 60s, where the residents back in those days, they didn't have recreation services for their kids. Their kids were playing in parking lots. And they got together and organized and brought in the first recreation center, Well, the residents in the 80s, they felt there was a need for a community center. We had recreation programs, but there wasn't a community center, place for the community to gather and come together. So they raised money. And when they had raised about $10,000, the city and the provincial government, I think it was Ontario Housing at the time, they pitched more money in, and the city decided to build the community center at 203 Sackville. The money that was collected went into a trust. It's called the Legacy Funds. The city is the trustee, has the capital, and the idea is that off that capital, the interest from that capital would provide grants for residents in the community to carry out community initiatives. So I don't know how much is in that pocket, how much is, but it's a fair amount of money, quite a bit amount of money. And that was something that the residents did. But we're also looking, when you look around our community, you'll see a number of different organizations that were started by residents. They were founded by residents. Regent Park Focus was founded by residents, community members. When it was first called the Regent Park Community, it was a Focus Community Coalition. before it became an organization. It was the Community Coalition Against Substance Abuse. That's how it came to be, and it was a group of residents and agencies that felt that something needed to be done because we were experiencing a terrible crisis when it came to drugs in the community and our young people who were getting involved in the drug trade. So that's one organization. Another organization, it's now called Early On, it's a program of the Health Center, but it was Parents for Better Beginnings. And it was founded by a group of moms in the community. One of their accomplishments was Toys Not Guns. The police do that now all over the city, but I don't know that they remember that it was a group of moms in Regent Park that actually started that project. So you'll see a lot of things today. You walk by them, you don't think much, you think, oh, but you don't know what went into, why are they here? The health center's here because the residents weren't being cared for well in the healthcare system. The healthcare system didn't understand their needs. So again, they got together with, different partners, and that's how we have the Regent Park Community Health Center. The community, it's because we needed something that was local so that people could access it. Because if you're low income, you may not have money to travel off to a doctor. But on top of that, doctors would give them treatment plans that they couldn't afford because they were low income. So there was a stigma, attitudes. A pregnant woman would come in and they'd be asking her if she's drinking, things like that. So that's why we have a community health center, because it's a model that understands its community. I think that a lot of people don't realize that before Toronto Community Housing decided to do revitalization, there were 2 attempts made by residents to have redevelopment done in this community. The first group was the North Regent Park Steering Committee, and they operated out of the Christian Resource Center, which is now the Fred Vic, over at 40 Oak. And it was a group of residents who came together and said, we need this redevelopment. And they had a really excellent plan. They couldn't get it funded, but there was a lot of support for it. And then after that, I can't remember when, I think it's sometime in the 90s, John Sewell came in and gathered with a group of residents to look at, can we get some redevelopment? Because as one of the challenges with Regent Park has been poor maintenance, period. The public housing was poorly maintained. And so it only had a 50-year life expectancy when they first built it. But now, through the years of poor maintenance, we've got things like, corners of the balconies falling off, compromised cement that you couldn't no longer keep that railing up. There was serious problems with rodent and pests and cockroaches and mice and, so very unhealthy buildings. And we didn't know at the time, full of asbestos. But we knew that it was time that we needed new buildings, but it wasn't a mixed income ideal. It was that you do this building, then you'd move over to this quadrant, then you'd move over to, but again, didn't get funded. Then Toronto Community Housing, I think that was 2003, 2004, around there. They got the city approval to do redevelopment. And I remember the city telling Toronto Community Housing the one thing that was conditional was they had to have a social development plan, that it wasn't good enough just to replace the buildings, but that they needed to improve the quality of life for residents in Regent Park. And that's what the social development plan aims to do. During that time, there was a lit search done to see looking around nationally and internationally of similar projects. And one of the things that they identified was, as a key performance indicator, was that you had to have social cohesion. So if you're going to do a mixed income community, that mixed income community, in order for it to be a healthy community, had to be socially cohesive. So the goal of social development is social cohesion and inclusion. I would say we're still a long way off from achieving that. Yeah, I miss the old community. I really do. I miss the familiarity of the old community. I miss that walking down the street and knowing who everybody is. You know, I miss the gathering over in the little places to see what's going on over here, what's going on over there. I miss the visibility of people. I don't see, it's so strange, but when I look out my window, I don't see the people like I used to see. And I miss that. To me, it's not the same. I've lived in my building since 2019. And when I lived in the building in 15 Bellshaw, I knew everybody on my hallway. I could tell you the name of all of them and their dogs, you know. But I lived there now for almost 5 years, and I finally can tell you the name of one of my neighbors I met in the elevator, who introduced himself by name and told me where they live, and so I know one person. It's not that they're not friendly. I mean, you nod and you say hello, and everybody's nice, but you don't have that, you know, that camaraderie, that. And I think it has to do with, like I said, back in the day, we all had shared interests. We had shared experiences. And I don't think we have that today. And I miss that very, very much. Community engagement has always been challenging. Back in the day, one of the biggest problems was that people had so many bread and butter issues. It was really hard to get people who had the time to put in to volunteer, you know, but not that they didn't, because they did. This was a very strong volunteer-led community. And I'm going to say that it still is. And I've seen that through the pandemic. Other tables, there were neighborhood tables. There are neighborhood tables around the city. Almost all of them just stopped. As soon as the pandemic hit, that was it. They stopped. All the neighborhood areas, but not Regent Park. Regent Park is that type of community that it did not stop because of the pandemic. We were told the night before that we could no longer gather. It wasn't safe to gather. And the very next morning we had our first Zoom call. And we would be on those Zoom calls from 9 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. And then we'd have what we called the after parties after our meetings, where we would just chit chat. And because of that, I did not feel isolated. It really kept me healthy. I think if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been able to go through that pandemic for as long as it was. Since I live on my own, it would have been horrible. But I still felt a sense of connectivity to my community and to my people, because we would be on Zoom calls all day long. And we got a lot of work done. So that's one thing I'm going to say for Regent Park. Regent Park doesn't quit. I've always said that I think that there's things about the revitalization that are wonderful, and then there are things about the revitalization that are sad. And I think when you ask people, what do you think about the revitalization? You'll get a polarized answer. There's some people who think it's the best thing that ever happened to Regent Park, and then you'll have others who think it's the worst thing that ever happened to Regent Park. There's no one commonality. It depends on the kind of experiences you had. There's folks that are happy, the new units, they love the new units, and the appliances, and then there's people who think that the new units are too small and they miss their large, big units that they used to have. So, there's great things, I love this place. Daniel Spectrum is like one of my favorite spots in Regent Park. It really is. I'll come in just to hang out sometimes. And I love the fact that it came from a vision of the women in the community who said they wanted a place where arts and culture and they could celebrate and everything all under one roof. And I've seen that here. So that, so there's things like that that are wonderful. The things I miss is like when I talk about the sense of community. I miss that. And I wish we could achieve that. And I think that keeps me going as far as community, as a community development worker. I really want that. I want to see that social cohesion. I want people all to have, it doesn't matter where you live, but you have that shared sense of belonging. And what I'm seeing is that's not happening. There seems almost a segregation of, the Toronto community housing and the market. There's no equity when it comes to communication and information sharing. Things like that are very important to me. I think they're part of what makes a community, is everybody has the same amount of information and the same amount of opportunities and the same, and so when we get there, then I think, it'll, but what I'm feeling is now we're just a community like every other neighborhood. Like we had something special here. Well, I've always, like I've said earlier, that I always believe that the residents know what residents need. And I always believe that they make more humane choices. If I'm involved in a decision that's going to have a direct impact on me personally, I'm going to make a choice that I could live with. And if I make a decision, and unfortunately it doesn't have the intention that it should have had, I'm going to know immediately whether or not it actually met the mark or it didn't. If I make a decision and I go off somewhere else and I don't have to deal with the impact of that decision, I can make a decision that may have a negative impact and I won't know. So that's why I think it's really critical. I've always believed that it's very critical to have people who are going to be directly impacted as part of the decision making. And that's one of the reasons why, is because they have better information about how that decision is going to affect. So if you want a positive result, then you need to know that if you did this, this will happen and it's going to be positive. And then if you do it and it doesn't have that, you're going to know immediately because you're directly affected. So I believe that. I've practiced that. I think that young people have a much better sense. I don't think they're involved enough in decision making. I've said before, I think children need to be consulted. I think that's a very overlooked area. I always say they have a different eyesight. They see things differently. They experience things differently. And it's very important to learn from the children what their experiences are. And I don't think they've been consulted. So, there's a lot of different aspects, like our seniors. We know our seniors are also under consulted. That's another group. You need to go to them. They're not coming to your meeting. You have evening meetings. Back in the day, we used to actually have shuttle buses where we would take the seniors and people with disabilities to different things and bring them home. I know some seniors who won't come out at night. They're not going to do it, but most of our meetings are evening meetings, our community night-wide meetings or evening meetings. And there needs to, I think we need more inclusion. So we need to look at how do we accommodate that. You know, we don't have we had a teen association for many years in Regent Park. You know, we don't have a teen council. We don't have a teen association. I think we need one. So, you know, for me, there's so much more work to do. I don't care that I'm 65. One of the things I've learned about advocating for the community is that there are many voices. Unfortunately, I feel sometimes there's divisiveness in the community, and there's the favored and those who are not favored, and that needs to stop. We have parallel structures going on right now. You know, the social development plan, there's the social development network, and then there's another group that's doing social development. I think it's called the Social Development Refresh Advisory. So there's like parallel structures going on instead of a unified structure. So if there were problems, my belief is to fix the problems, not to set up parallel structures. I think that's very unhealthy. And it just perpetuates divisionism among the residents in the community. There's this camp over here and this camp over there, and that just does not work. So I'm very concerned about that, and I'm hoping that, you know, that will be resolved. I believe in one Regent Park. I believe, you know, in community unity, and I don't think we can have that if this kind of us and them and divisionism and, you know, is being validated and allowed to continue. I think it needs to be addressed and needs to stop. And people in positions of power have to be neutral. They can't be taking sides. I think that's very dangerous. So those are some of the things that I think need some work in the community, because it's a lot of people who won't get involved because they're very turned off. I've heard this or I've heard that, or this happened or that happened, and I won't go. If I won't work with them, I don't like him, and she doesn't like her, and there's no room for that in community building. You can't build community like that. You build silos like that. You know, the same that I feel about I think the demographics. I hear there's going to be a needs assessment done. It's about time. That's what I have to say. I think it should have happened a long time ago. People living in the market buildings, nobody knows anything about them. That's how do you serve a community when you don't know the needs? And it's not the composition that we expected when it first started. We first started, we thought it would be the people living in the units would be owners. That was one assumption we had. You know, double income, no kids, wealthy, upwardly mobile, young professionals. That's not who's living in the units at all. Due to what's happened in the housing market, they became investment properties. So a lot of the people living in the units are renters, not owners. As far as wealthy, there's a perception, well, they're still wealthy if they can spend $3,000 on rent, and, you know, they're still well off. Well, that's not what's going on. There's people who are, like, living a family of 6 in a one-bedroom unit because they can't afford anything more. They need somewhere to live. There's people living in the units that are on RGI waiting lists or for affordable housing waiting lists, working 2-3 jobs to pay their rent, paying more than 50% of their income for rent, you know, or 3-4 people renting a unit because none of them can afford a 1-bedroom. That's not your wealthy owner. You know, and then we talk about, well, you know, we need to prioritize low income. We need to so there's almost a neglect or we don't need to worry about the market. You know, the market will worry about the market. You know, they're okay. But we need to worry about the Toronto Community Housing, which, yes, we do. We absolutely do. But what I'm saying is the demographics are not what we thought. And there's people struggling who are equity deserving residents in the market. And I don't think that was anticipated when they started this project. So I'm hoping that with the needs assessment that it actually uncovers some of that. So we start to look at, because you have to look after all the community. You can't just look after a segment of the community to have a healthy community. It's not beneficial to anyone. You know, so that's an area for me of work that needs to be done, is a real good, solid understanding of who's living here and what are the needs of the people who are living here. You can't determine need based on housing type. You know, and I find it ironic because having lived in a community, you know, that had discrimination based on housing type for so many years, of, you know, well, this false perception and the myths about Regent Park, you know, and based on housing type, because you live in Regent Park in public housing. So I'm seeing the same thing. You know, there's these, now it's you live in market, therefore, but it's not valid. It's not necessarily how the life experience of those people are. And we don't know. We just don't have the information. Like, we don't know, what's the eviction turnover rate for people who can't afford to stay in their places? We don't know. You know, and I think we need more information. I think we would have a much healthier community if we had better information about what's going on here and who lives here and what the needs are here. So I'm really hoping that, you know, when a needs assessment is done in this community. I know they're doing some listening sessions, but again, my fear is that you're not going to get a great representation from the market. Number one, they're not getting the information. The only way that they're getting information is if you send it to the property manager and the property manager shares it. Well, we've been trying to do that now for a number of years, and it's not effective. Sometimes you get a community leader who lives in the building and shares information in that building, so that, you know, that building may get information. But as far as property managers, some of them, you know, the names, they've changed jobs so that somebody else, and the information's going to Nowheresville, or they're part-time. There's different rules. Some of them can share, others have to get board permission. Boards are only like 3 people, and they don't meet that regularly, that you know, by the time you get their permission, it's too late. Or you're getting information that's late. So by the time you get it, it's okay, you've made other plans. So there's those kind of things that are really stopping, you know, good community engagement. And like, I hear the same thing from Toronto Community Housing residents. Some buildings have better information sharing than others, you know, so the same thing goes for them. So I think that's the communication is huge. I think it's like important, and I got to thank again Regent Park Focus for the work they've done around improving our communication. I rely a lot on RPTV news. It's very helpful. I think they should be more involved in community issues. Yes. I think we need more young voices in all of our community affairs. I think that it's missing, and I would do whatever I could to improve that. I was a young woman when I started this. I was only 24 years old, but I had also been involved as an advocate for teen moms when I was a teenager. So, you know, I have a long history, I'm still a champion when it comes to young people. I think society has changed so much that we need their intelligence, we need their skills, we need their knowledge, we need their expertise. They've experienced the world differently than we have. And I say that it's not enough just to pull another chair up at the table. Some of us need to get out of the chair and give the chair to the younger people and step back and trust that they can do a good job. And I really think we need to see more of that. It needs to be supported. Like I say, one of the things that's missing for me in this community is a teen council or a youth council, some kind of a governing body of young people. And I think it would be well worth resourcing. I became an advocate when I was quite young. I was a teen mom in the 70s. And during that time, it wasn't a popular thing to be a teen mom. And I was very fortunate to be myself and my friend became the first two members of the first teen moms group in Toronto. It was a YWCA. We worked with a public health nurse and a social worker who volunteered their time. And we met once a week. And I was able to do, there was different news articles done on us there. I was part of different public speaking opportunities. So, we just had to, we needed to be treated as responsible adults. That was the challenge. If you are a parent, you needed to be treated as a responsible adult. And in 1975, when I had my child, that wasn't the way it was. Health professionals who would call my mother. I was a married woman. I got married at 15. But instead of talking to me, they would phone my mother. My mother would say, "You have to phone her. She's a married woman." But it was like that. People felt no way in the streets to stop you and look at you and make negative comments about you. And, the healthcare professionals, the same thing. So there was a need to do, some public awareness about, how to treat teen moms with dignity and respect. Even schools. They didn't allow you to go to school after you had a child. They said you were a bad influence on other young women. So it was a very different society, and there was a need for public speaking and people to come out and advocate for, a better quality of life for teen parents. And I got involved. I did that.
Great. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please follow our social media platforms. For more information, check out our website.